Hi, this is Laura Forehand from the Desert Sanctuary podcast. As we have authentic discussions about deconstruction and religious trauma, please be aware that some episodes may contain stories of sexual abuse and or suicide. Please take care of your mental health. We love you. Welcome to the Desert Sanctuary with Carl and Laura Forehand.
Often when we have doubts about religion or simply want to ask questions, it can feel like we are wandering out into the desert.
We would like to invite you to join our sanctuary, the Desert Sanctuary.
We've tried to pick guests that would resonate with and challenge us and our fellow seekers here in the desert.
We believe that a key to the journey is to keep asking good questions, and we believe that all stories are sacred.
Our hope is that you will find life and healing for your body and mind, and that you will be able to be where you are and be who you are.
And now, here is our show. Hi, welcome to the Desert Sanctuary podcast. I'm Laura Forehand. I am here with Carl Forehand, and we do have a very special guest. We've been chatting a lot before we hit record, so I'm really excited for this conversation. Anything you need to share, Carl?
Just with all
I'll give you permission to say hi.
Thank you. all our future plans for today, some of them fell apart, so we got
right.
Tons of time to talk today now.
Things happen. Grandkids get sick, all that kind of stuff.
I just think we're grateful. It's really hard to get pastors, ex-pastors' wives, and ex-pastors' children to talk to us.
Yeah.
Because all of us have spent so much time in the spotlight and under a microscope, and and when we're trying to sort through all of this and deconstruction and find out what's real and so on, and then heal from the trauma we might have. It's like we don't necessarily need attention and a distraction, but that's why we're so thankful that Bex is with us today. And we want to get into her story.
So we do have Bex here, and so she's a new friend of ours, friend to the podcast, and so let's dive right in. Welcome to the podcast, Bex. We're so glad that you're here with us today.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Paul Young says that stories are sacred. And we really believe that here at the Desert Sanctuary. We think a person's story is really important. And we take it really seriously. We're honored that you would be vulnerable enough and trust us enough to share your story with us. So we're thankful for that.
Absolutely.
We want to invite you just to tell your story in whatever detail that you want. And then we'll ask you questions based on that. And usually the time goes really, really fast. So tell us your story.
Okay, great. Well, I grew up fully indoctrinated into the Nazarene Church. I'm generational pastors of my grandfathers, my uncles, my father. My brother became a pastor and was my pastor for most of my adult life. My sister is a missionary. And so even though I was not, didn't go to school for being a pastor, I served in the role of children's leader for almost 20 years and youth pastor for another about 12 years. And so my whole life was living from Sunday to Sunday. That's just what I grew up in. That's what I was used to. I think that things started to change for me. I early on, like college age, after college and young adulthood, I was kind of known as being one who would question things. I was always a skeptic. I've always been one to lean really heavily into science and rational. I want to say rational thought. I don't. Critical thinking, I should say.
Yeah.
And I really pushed back a lot. I questioned a lot. I went through a time of really I even took a step back from ministry for a little over a year while I really like dug into things. But it wasn't until I've heard on other podcasts people refer to kind of a whole situational thing we've all been in, but I've heard people refer to it as the holy untrinity, and meaning the kind of onslaught of Trumpism, national. You have your nationalism, Christian nationalism,
Mhm.
Trump, and that being one of the pieces. Another piece being everything that happened through like Black Lives Matter situation, and then COVID. Just the differences, everything from subtle to major differences that were brought out through how we all see the world and respond to the world and respond to each other's needs.
Yeah, it certainly was like a perfect storm or something that happened
Yes.
in there. And it's surprising how many deconstruction stories have Trump in them.
Yeah.
Yes.
That
it's
started
like,
around that time.
well, I'm going through this questioning and Trump, that's part of it.
It's not him, too. It's not him. It's the response of those who are around us, our culture, our world, especially people we thought that we were aligned with, churches, pastors. Like, I just was so shocked by the world's response to all of those things. And I started to become very aware that the Jesus that I was taught to follow was not the same Jesus that was being interpreted through the people who were around me. I will say to your listeners, like, I think my story, even though, there's so many stories that are similar. One thing that's very different about my story is that even though I am deconstructing and even though I'm coming away from all of these beliefs, I look back and I say, in some ways, I think it makes it even harder to deconstruct because I believe my family, my parents, my youth pastor, key people around me, I had a great life. I had a great upbringing. I don't have the horror stories that so many friends and people that I know have experienced. My parents were genuine and real and loved the Jesus that I thought I knew and truly loved people and taught me to be this person that I am that seeks after intense justice for the marginalized people in our world. So it's like I am deconstructing, but not from my upbringing, not from what I learned or like what I saw directly. I'm deconstructing from what I'm now realizing is sort of this overall concept that the rest of the culture has. And then that forcing me to kind of dig into the realities of the actual teachings that at their core, the teachings of hell, the teachings of eternal punishment, the teachings of really what is like a fear-based control over your thinking and starting to pull that apart. Now, what's beautiful about all of that is that I was affluent in apologetics. I actually know how to defend my own thinking.
Yeah.
My own questions. I know what to say. Right. I know how to defend that, and I no longer believe it.
Right.
And that's a crazy place to be sitting. It's a crazy thing to go through. Now, mix all of that, as Carl said, that perfect storm. For me, that perfect storm just kind of got crazier when just before 2020, before the pandemic and everything, my husband and I, we'd been married for 30 years and we did ministry together our whole lives. We were both very involved. We did marriage-based ministries. We did youth ministry together. And I was blindsided by him having an affair and leaving our family after 30 years of marriage. We were literally known as a power couple, spiritual power couple. I never saw that coming. I didn't see the character flaws looking back. I knew he was going through something for a while that I thought was, because of losing family members and different things. But anyway, that actually had me, everybody who knows that I'm going through this say, oh, that's because her husband left. Oh, she's doing this because her husband left. And I kind of laugh at that, because if anything, I think that's when I was the closest to, quote unquote, closest to God in my faith. I only knew faith. I only knew God to fall back on when things got the hardest and the darkest. And that's what I did wholeheartedly, hardcore. But then it was just after that we really started facing all of this, what I already referred to as the unholy trinity. But it just left me some freedom really in my life to start to unpack, because everything else was changing so drastically. It just left me some freedom to just kind of sit back. My children had all, quote, fallen away from the faith and didn't believe, and understandably so. And it's just like I was in the desert. I was alone in my faith, and as crazy as it sounds, things like all of the church leaders, people that our church had been patterned after, and like these people who write marriage books, and you've read them and you've done all the things, and now you find out they were in a terrible, crisis in life and doing terrible things, and you've got like I was watching things like documentaries about Hillsong, and even things that are about like something that has nothing to do with my faith, but like, people coming out of Mormonism and all different kinds of things. And so the more I looked at, the more I saw the similarities in what my life had been, and the things that on how, because I look at all that stuff and I go, oh, that's true, but not my upbringing. That's how I felt, was like, oh yeah, that's terrible for, that was a cult. That was definitely a cult, but not my upbringing.
Right.
Like that. And that was, oh yeah, that's a bad thing, but not my upbringing. And then eventually I just had to go, oh no, there's a lot of similarities here to where to how I was raised and what my thinking was, and how I treated people and how I saw people.
Yeah.
So that was really the start of it. And it was almost just like an opening Pandora's box for me. Once I was willing to open the box, and then other people started coming into my lives that were experiencing a lot of the same things and going through the same traumas, and that their support and us just talking together and thinking together, it really like catapulted that situation.
Yeah.
I want to know your opinion on kind of a statement I wrote down while you were talking about, we say that people fall away from, their belief, or they don't believe anymore.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, how I see that is what we're saying when we say, oh, they don't believe anymore, is that what I'm really saying when I say that is they don't believe like me, or they don't believe what the church or the world thinks they should believe.
Correct.
Because I feel like we all have a belief system, right? It just ours may not match. So
it's not that they don't believe, it's that they believe differently.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. So, but I think that when we do that though, I think that can be so detrimental, because we're saying, I just think we need to deconstruct that a little bit, even.
Right.
That we're saying that, I'm saying that, Carl fell away. He doesn't believe anymore. But really what I'm saying is he doesn't believe exactly like me.
Yeah.
Correct.
And that's uncomfortable for me.
Because
I think we need to, call it what it is.
You have to believe in the things you can't prove. You have to believe. You have to have faith in those things that you believe. But yeah, it's just changing. And for you, what I heard you saying is it's not a lack of knowledge. It's not a lack of asking questions, because you could defend.
Right.
Absolutely.
You could defend your beliefs. Just the more you study, the deeper you went, you realize maybe I'm wrong. and you
Yep.
start to move into better understanding. That shouldn't be a bad thing. Like I
Right.
said, there's a lot of good things about religion. It kind of brings us together. We help each other. We, share responsibility and things like that. But when we say, well, you're either in or out,
Mm.
and I found out it's two beliefs. Because if someone says to you, you don't believe in hell and you don't believe in this, or and you don't go to church anymore, it takes about two of those, and then people just pull back because they can't.
Yep.
They just can't anymore.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that like it's like I don't know. In general, I think that we have to get to a place where I know for me, one of the biggest things that started kind of preempted all of this was when I went through that when I was an early adult. I mentioned that I went through like for at least a year where I pulled back from ministry and everything. I started with the mustard seed of faith, as we called it at the time, that there's a verse in the Bible that says, Lord, I believe, help thou my unbelief.
Mm.
And I just kind of started with that small, and I just started building from there. And, but one thing that had changed drastically, and this is a huge thing for me, one thing that had changed drastically was I never, after that moment, had believed in the infallibility of the Bible. I had come to a place where I thought this was a book that was written and is fallible and is human and maybe gives us some good direction and some insight into, and I believe the history parts as well as they could be established, just like anything written by human.
Right.
And that was intriguing to me. And I believed that maybe it was God, or, God breathed in a way, but not infallible, not God sanctioned. I don't know.
Right.
So once you open that possibility, it does change your life.
Mm-hmm.
And that, if I'm on the other side, see, again, as you said, as I'm talking and I tell people what I think, I hear my apologetics voice in my head.
Mm-hmm.
I'm literally defending it as I'm talking.
Right.
And it's like to get to a place where I'm able to just squelch that and say, it's it's almost humorous to me. I'll start to say something. I'm like, oh, I know how to defend that. I know what to say. But don't
know
you
what
guys
the talking
think,
points are? Yeah.
don't you guys think that at the core, most anyone who is involved in religion, maybe any type of religion, denomination, whatever, especially if it's a religion based in fear or the theology that tells us that if to do this or we go to hell, or that there is an eternal, destination,
Final
of
judgment.
Like,
judgment.
Don't you think anybody who's involved in that, if they're super honest at their core, will tell you that their faith is based in something that feels uncomfortable, something that just at the very last of it doesn't quite make sense.
That's exactly right.
100%. I feel like that's me for sure.
Yes.
Or that was me. And
Yes.
that's when it started to kind of unravel for me.
Yeah.
And that was still when Carl was a pastor. He was still like lead pastor at a church. And so, and then you run into well, who do I tell? Right. Because I can't,
Right.
I mean, I don't want to be responsible for bringing my husband's ministry to an end, but I feel like I can't express. And this was not his narrative to me. This was my internal narrative. It's like, how can I be the one to bring everything to a screeching halt?
Yeah. And even though those people that you might have told probably had the same doubts, and they get to that same place. But
it's scary. It's scary when you say, when you're thinking, I have doubts, that critical thinking starts coming in. I mean, I'll speak for myself. Like, that was just a scary place to be. Like, why am I having these thoughts?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But we're taught we're taught how to deal with those thoughts and how to squelch those thoughts and what that is and how to pray through that and different things like that. But, I'm just thinking as I'm talking to you guys, like the debate teacher in school tells students, you tell students to, if you're a good debater, you can take either side.
Yeah.
And you can defend it, and you can get people to believe what you're saying. And what I'm realizing that I think I was living in that was uncomfortable was that I knew how to debate and to convince people. And yet at the same time, while I was doing that, there was a voice in the back of my head that was going, but I'm convincing them. And I know that if you take what I'm saying and you still keep following that train of thought, it still doesn't work out in the end.
Right.
It still doesn't work out. So
And
it's like
it can-
I'm debating, kind of in a way, I'm almost debating the other side.
Right.
If you're good at it and you're smart enough to know how to debate all of the different aspects, then you're probably also good enough to realize you're not doing that thoroughly, and there is more to that. It does. You know that what you're saying doesn't even make sense. Like it still could be debated. So that was just I know I'm talking in circles, but that was just a
that was
trap
great.
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
I
you
was
said
caught
that.
in, where I just had that back of my mind feeling like, I think if I kept talking, I would talk myself out of this. Like,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
But
Well-
that's it.
Yeah. So a question that kind of came to my mind was we've talked a lot about critical thinking, and I feel like through your story, and maybe this is when we started hitting record or before, it felt like critical thinking, what for you was something safe to have, right? It was okay to question. So did you feel safe in your family of origin? Did you say your father was a pastor, is a pastor, right? You
Correct.
come from.
My father was a pastor, and what I didn't say about that story, which is kind of interesting and funny, I don't know how many of your followers would understand this term. My father was a traveling evangelist.
Okay.
So most of my life, he was a pastor early on, but most of my life, he was a traveling music, song, and preaching evangelist.
Mhm.
Now, what that means for me is a little different than if you're talking to a regular pastor's kid. I
Mhm.
didn't grow up in the what is called a parsonage, if people understand what that means. I
Yeah,
didn't grow
yeah.
up there. I didn't have that kind of scrutiny on me. I was in a different church almost every single week,
Okay.
and I was put on stage at the age of 4, 5.
Mhm.
I was singing.
Okay.
Right.
And I'm the microphone, and then in the summers, my summer vacations were spent traveling in a van with my family with a puppet stage on the back of the van, and we got out and we set up Vacation Bible School.
Yeah.
And we did
Mhm.
Vacation Bible School for the summers. It was, a lot of it was fun, but as an adult now, being more a part of the secular world and like involved in what now is real and regular life to me, I look back and go, that was crazy. Oh, you don't have a normal childhood.
Being a quote unquote normal pastor, a pastor you'd have
Right.
at the same place every week.
Right.
We would have evangelists or really, really good preachers come and
Right.
do revival or do
Revival for a week. Yep.
yeah. And so I experienced that. Here's one thing I noticed: when they would have an altar call and people would come forward, and a lot of times that falls to the pastor or the people of the church to counsel them.
Correct.
And I would gather those people together and say, so what is your decision? And many times they didn't know. They didn't even know what they were doing, but that
Yes.
speaker had convinced them
Because
that
they
it
were
was-
pulled through the emotion. Yes.
Mhm. That's right.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Emotional manipulation.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's the hardest part for me, was just really coming to terms with understanding, even when I feel like my upbringing was positive and my parents were wonderful,
Mhm.
the emotional manipulation that has been involved in my entire life from whatever, and it's what was taught to them, it's what we all learned to do and yet I think this might speak to some of your listeners if they've been in similar situations. It's for me personally, I don't look back. I haven't had to deal with a lot of resentment and bitterness
Mm-hmm.
towards my parents or the people that have been the churches, because I see them more as being like me. Like I know that my parents thoroughly believed what they were saying.
Mhm.
And, the way I describe it to people is like if your child was in the middle of the street or you thought it was the middle of the road and you thought a car was going to hurt them, you would be desperate to get them out of the middle of that road and you would do everything that you can. If you found out later that it's actually not a road, that's just, that there was just some concrete there for something else.
Mm.
And you didn't have to run out, grab them, pull them back. You didn't have to do all that. Even maybe the child gets a bruise on their arm or something from that. But it's like, as being that child and looking at that or knowing what happened, I don't have to be upset at my parents for yanking me out of what they thought was the middle of a road.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because I too believe that it was the middle of a road. Now I'm older. I too believed that was truth, and they believed that it was truth, and my parents, my family, my pastors, they were all so genuine and genuinely loved and believed in God and were doing what they knew to do. I do not set back with bitterness or resentment towards any of that.
I think that's a good injunction from you, or suggestion from you, that because a lot of us go through that, we want to
Yes.
be angry.
Uh-huh.
One of the questions I also want to ask is did you go through this identity crisis of who am I now? What do I do with my time? What do I do on Sunday? What do I, who am I?
100%.
How do I
100%. And still
identify?
am.
But one of the things we fight in that process is being angry, and
Yeah.
we say it's okay to be angry, and we want to acknowledge that, and when we want to say it when we are, but I think it's important, as you've pointed out very clearly, that we need to assess where they are and that we were there also,
Yeah.
and that you work with the information you have.
Yep.
And if I could, I'd encourage them to keep asking questions and move forward and keep thinking and keep asking questions, but also acknowledge that they're stuck in a system that I was stuck in once. And it seems very appropriate, and it seems right, and it seems essential. So I hear you being compassionate. Yeah.
I think one of the hardest things is it feels so safe.
Mm-hmm.
It feels so, yeah. When I talked to my boys to explain to them when I was at a place where I felt like I could tell them, hey, this is where I'm at. One of the things I told them, and I don't know that they really understood, but I said, this is going to sound really weird. It's because I was just trying to relate to them sort of the emotional pain I was going through. And I said, I know this is going to sound weird, but as much as I'm telling you what I now know, what I now realize, if I could go back and wash my brain of all that, and like my boys could be in church with their families, and everybody could be, in the ministries, and everybody could, it's like, if I had the option to do all of that, and we're all at church and we're all happy, like I always thought we were going to be, and blah, 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 blah. And I can have that, Men in Black moment where all the thoughts go out of my head and I don't know anything that I've ever seen. I said, I've got to be honest, I would be tempted to take it.
Mm-hmm.
And they thought that was so weird to say, but I was just like, I just mean that I miss just the security and safety and comfort that comes with the idea of just having a set of parameters that you just know. This is your truth. You know it. Here it is. It feels safe. It's comfortable. Yeah. It's almost like that's what religion does for us. We don't want to not know things.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
We don't want to not have the answers.
And it says we're right and God is on our side.
And if that doesn't feel good, yeah.
What do we go? Yeah. Can I ask you a question?
Well, can I finish my question?
Yeah, go ahead. I got 3 more. So.
Yeah, I know, but I started asking a question, then we got to talking about something else. But so I'm wondering, with this critical thinking, did you feel it was safe, comfortable, whatever whatever adjective you want to use there, to talk to your parents as you started maybe having some questions? Did you feel like, because I love what I'm hearing about, your parents and just, how loving they were, because that is not everybody's story. And so I love that for you. But as you grew and started, I'm just not really sure about, like, I've been hearing this all my life, just not really sure that I buy into that 100%. So, like, to use your example, when you kind of realized that you weren't in danger in the middle of the road, and the middle of the road was really something else. I mean, did it feel like it was safe to discuss those things?
Yeah, that's interesting. So for me, my parents have both been gone for quite a while. But when I did go through that back when I was a young adult, and I was in my father's church at the time in ministry. I was the children's pastor at the time, and that was difficult. My dad was the pastor. My brother was the associate pastor. We were in a Willow Creek style church, reaching out to the unchurched, and I think it was really hard. I know my mom would have normal conversations with me. She did tell me one time that my dad had been pretty upset and was very emotional about what I was going through. But I didn't do a lot of dialogue with them. I just kind of told them where I was at. And I first asked everybody to not dialogue with me because I felt like I couldn't dig into the answers if they were involved.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
Makes sense.
And then I did that for about 6 or 7 months, and I had read and dialogue with other people, and I was really at that point really diving in hard. And then I came back and finally said, "Okay, I'm ready to have your input, but I will take it in small spurts at a time." So and then my brother would send me a couple of things or a book to read or just different things like that. And so, yeah, that was a long time ago and I don't remember too much. I do know it was just hard. It was hard. And I've been very aware, as now in my 50s and going through this, I do know it would be much harder if my parents were alive and I had to deal with that. I have close friends who, are dealing with that and have pastor dads and are having to navigate all of that.
Yeah, of
stuff.
course.
Yeah.
So you mentioned a Trinity earlier, and we didn't get to dive into that at all, but maybe I just missed it. Sometimes Laura catches things and I'd miss them. But the Trinity that you talked about, there was a Trinity.
The unholy Trinity.
Yeah.
That was the three. That's not coming out of my head. That was mentioned on a couple of other podcasts that I listen to that I really like. They have described this kind of catapulting into so much of people deconstructing through the unholy Trinity being the events of Trump, Black Lives Matter, and COVID.
Yeah, and you did explain that.
Mm-hmm.
My friend Mark Harris has a book called The Diabolical Trinity. And his is healing religious trauma from a wrathful God, tormenting hell, and a sinful self.
Mm-hmm.
So his was just a little bit different. So you did explain that before, and I just didn't connect.
Mm-hmm.
That would be my fault. You also mentioned justice at one point during your talk. So what does that amount to? What does that mean when you say justice?
Yes. Yeah. I think for me, I'm just learning more as I become at older age, but I guess I have been a person who has always been, and here again in my head, because we're indoctrinated, I want to say it's a spiritual gift, but a part of who I am, I am learning is I just lean very heavy into the importance of just justice. I one of my favorite Bible verses was always um, do justly, walk humbly.
Uh-huh.
Micah 4 something.
Yeah, yeah,
Micah,
That was always
And,
my favorite too.
yeah. Seek justice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Walk humbly.
love mercy, walk humbly.
Yeah.
There you go.
And it's taken me a little while to realize what all of that means. I have always felt like people who weren't very overly concerned about the justice that is done for people who are marginalized or who don't have all of the I don't know. I think we're all I'm very aware of my own privilege, and I think that people who aren't aware of that and don't realize how injustice affects our lives, I couldn't understand how people couldn't be outraged by injustice. I just thought, I always was like, well, you're not a Christian if you're not just outraged by these kinds of injustice. But now I'm realizing more and more that's almost more of a something that some people are just born with a characteristic where they're more bothered, more in tune to injustice, and it's just something that's always really, really mattered to me.
Yeah. There's a dialogue right now, and there's kind of two different ways to see justice, I think. And it really boils down to, is justice who you put down, or is justice who you lift up?
Wow.
So, and
love that.
That's a politician that's saying that right now, but I don't want to get into that necessarily, but it's, do I see justice as punishing the people that disagree with me?
Right.
Or is justice, like you said, realizing my privilege, realizing, the advantage I've had, and then standing up for the marginalized people of the world, basically.
Absolutely.
Right. So I think that's a great journey that many, many people are starting on. And it's difficult, because you have to admit that you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
Absolutely.
And you have to learn, and it's hard.
I've always said that the older I get, the less black and white the world gets. And I think that's so much of Christianity, people who are indoctrinated, maybe in any religion, the more that you are seeped into that, the more black and white the world is. And I think I think it's by my very nature that led me to be a person who would deconstruct. But since I was very young and very little, I just struggled with seeing anything as black and white, and more and more and more as I got older.
And I agree with you that, like, the deeper you are entrenched in religion, the more black and white the world looks. But in my experience as well, it's like that black and white would change. In other words, the rules would change.
Yeah.
Based on, I'll give you an example. Like,
that's when you knew that something was up.
Right? It's like weird. How come?
I was pretty black and white about this before.
It's an eternal truth that just changed.
But like an example is we were, or Carl was pastor at one of our first churches, and of course, premarital sex and getting married out of wedlock was a huge, sin. Until one of the main family's daughters got pregnant, and then every child's a blessing. So
that's right.
I agree that it's very black and white until we need it that black and white to just shift a little bit. That's always been so odd to me. And I'm not saying that she should have been condemned or anything like that. But I'm also like, well, where was the grace for the other people that have been in the same situation when your daughter wasn't? We didn't have any grace for that woman over there.
Right.
But we're supposed to have grace for your child.
Right.
Because you're
special,
a deacon in the church or whatever. Do you see what I'm saying? So I don't like the way, like, I agree that it's very black and white, but I don't like the way that shifts depending on whether that's affecting my family or not.
Correct. Right.
Yeah.
And that's what starts that uncomfortable, you know?
Journey.
And
yeah.
we swallow that and we go, I'm not going to think about that right now.
Yep.
I'm not going to think about that right now. Like there's something there that doesn't make all the sense, but that's me questioning things. I shouldn't be doing that. Can't question it. Can't question it.
Right. That's right.
I think you've pretty clearly illustrated this question I'm about to ask, but I'm going to ask it anyhow, just to make sure. Have you discovered, it sounded like you've discovered your intuition. You started to pay attention to your intuition. And in my opinion, organized religion tends to discourage intuition. Can't trust
Yes,
yourself.
It does.
Can't trust yourself and so on. Is that your experience as well? I'm just kind
Absolutely.
of clarifying. Yeah.
Yes. And you know, it comes back to critical thinking is when you start realizing that there's a dynamic put into play for discouraging that thought. That is, you know, then when I said, you know, I started watching documentaries that are about whether it was Scientology or whether it was Mormonism or whatever, those are the same kinds of things. They'll talk about how they were indoctrinated by believing this or believing that and discouraging critical thinking, discouraging your intuition. Mm-hmm. And I started thinking, yeah, like we do.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's the same that we do, you know, and then it's just, oh, I got to tell you one time, this is when a switch really flipped for me. And this is when I wrote this letter to all of my youth, even though I had already been planning on doing that for like a year. I was really just processing that because I felt so heavy about it. And I watched this documentary. I can't even tell you what it's called and I wouldn't, but it was about some lady and it's set in like the 90s. And she was known for being this great, like, and she was a children's minister. Mm-hmm. And she'd go around and she would do children's ministry and in different churches and do these big rallies and all this stuff. And they were just following her. It was even an old documentary. They were just following her and showing what she did. And this woman was basically teaching children how to prophesy and teaching them how to speak in tongues and doing all these things. And I'm watching it and I'm like, I spent 20 years in children's ministry and I was the upfront. I was the person who could influence the kids and get them to do the things and not that, but when I saw that and I just thought this is about as messed up as I was just blown away at how messed up it was. And yet if I would have watched it 10 years ago, I would have been like, oh, there's some stuff I could take from that. Like I would not have seen it that way.
Right.
And that was one of the times where it's just a switch flip where I thought it's like I was getting outside of the bubble and starting to look in. Mm-hmm. And I think once you start being able to remove yourself back and start looking inward as if you are an observer from the outside and taking a look at it from a critical viewpoint, like these other documentaries have done in other situations, you start doing that and you look back and you go, oh, and you start seeing it from a whole different lens.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe one advantage pastors' families have is they know how the sausage is made. You know,
absolutely.
My kids weren't as impressed with me as some people were, but somehow they learned to think for themselves. I'm really proud of them.
I do think that like one thing that they saw was, you know, perhaps grace from you preached from the pulpit, but when they looked out, because I just picture my son because he ran the sound at all of our churches. Just looking out and seeing the opposite of that a lot of times. And I think that's like, they were able to see it before, you know, even I could truly see it. Even you, Carl, could truly see it. Mm-hmm. So, and in a lot of ways, I'm really thankful for that because, you know, I mean, I'm not saying they aren't going through therapy and won't need therapy, but you know,
yes.
I'm just grateful that they were able to go way before I did. You know, something's not quite right here. This isn't sitting really well with me.
Yeah.
So. So we like to ask all of our guests on the podcast, if you had a bulletin board that, a billboard. Oh, I always say bulletin board because I'm a teacher. I'm so sorry. A billboard.
Oh, I am too. So
Oh, yay.
Yay.
If you had a billboard that you could put up anywhere that could say anything you wanted it to say, your message to the world, what would that be? And it can be as long or as short as you want. If it's long, people can pull over to read it. If it's short,
We didn't.
Are you guys kidding me? You couldn't tell me ahead of time you
Nope.
were asking.
No.
We never do.
This is our little. We're gonna spring this on our guests.
Yeah.
Man, I have no idea. I don't know.
We don't want you to overthink it. We just want it to be
Yeah.
what your
Don't
part
overthink
is.
it. I think that I will say this: when I wrote this letter to my youth, one of the things I said at the end, I said, if I could say one thing to you at this point, I just said, it's ironic because our youth program was called Extreme Teens. And I said, if I could say anything to you, I would say going forward, as far as like, I'm known for being a person to help them in life or live their lives or conduct their lives or whatever. So it was like advice on that. And I said, always just try to be, first of all, my new thing in life is keep it 100 in all situations. Just, I am learning. I no longer am okay with being in a room where I have to pretend like I'm okay with the people that are in the room, or pretend like I'm okay with what's being said, or speak up or speak out or leave, or be so true to yourself and what your thinking is. You don't have to be unkind. You never have to be unkind.
Right.
You just have to be true to who you are.
Right.
And then try to avoid, I think this is something that's very important in our society right now, but we've got to start teaching kids, not just critical thinking, but avoid the extremes. And that's why I said it was ironic that we were the extreme teens. And I was telling these kids, please try to be aware of and avoid extremes. If you are in the extreme end of almost anything, I have found that the extreme side of any thought, of any belief, of any activity, the extreme is a dangerous place to be. Yeah. It's a dangerous place to live. It opens up your mind for either being controlled or sliding into just conspiracy type situations. Those are just dangerous places in our world right now.
Yeah.
And so, I would think I would just say, avoid the extremes. Keep it 100 and avoid the extremes.
Yeah.
Really good.
Good.
That's a weird billboard, but
it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's your billboard and it can be anything you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I hear two really good messages.
Here in Ohio,
really anybody.
Here in Ohio, we have a very famous billboard that's between Columbus and Cincinnati. There's a big billboard that just says, "Hell is real." And everybody knows that billboard. It's so famous that there's even like sports. Anytime like the Columbus team plays the Cincinnati team once a year, they call it the "Hell is real," game, because it's like that billboard is between the two. So it's a very famous billboard, and it's been there my whole life. So I don't know who maintains this billboard, but isn't that fun?
Yeah. There's something similar to that on our way, like north of either St. Joe or Kansas City, but it says something to the effect that, Jesus is like undeniable or something like that, to where like there's undisputable proof that, Jesus or God is real. And so it's like, I just like, when I read that, I kind of get a little bit angry.
Triggered.
Because triggered. Yeah. That's a good word. Because like, just in that one sentence, I'm like, you are, like we've been talking about, you're kind of robbing people of their critical thinking.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And even by saying hell is real, Okay, I can't
Yeah.
question that. I can't
Right.
dig into that a little bit more.
Even though, and I
Right.
can't prove it, but I can't
Right.
question it.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good. I can't prove it, but I can't question it. Yeah.
There's a comedian that I follow that I think is hilarious, and I had posted her the other day too. But she said the funnest part about, she said, I think my favorite part, and it's just the way she delivers it. I won't say it funny, but she says my favorite part about being a Christian was just being better than everybody else. And she goes, because you have to believe that.
Yeah.
And she goes, you can't question that, because if you questioning God is the worst sin that you can commit. And she says, there's the worst. She said, there's coveting your neighbor's wife, there's murder, and then at the top of the list, critical thinking.
That's good.
I was like, good. Yes, exactly. That's
right.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
The one other thing I think that I would like to say to anybody who is like thinking about deconstructing or in the middle of it or whatever, I was just reading something from someone who was saying, is it okay for me to believe this, or is it okay for me to think this, or whatever? And I had just responded and just said that, like, to deconstruct it's a different thing than a demo, right? Think about flipping a house. It's something that I do as a job. So if I'm deconstructing or I'm demoing, it's completely different. We're not, demoing is done and out and everything gets tossed. It's aggressive. And you don't spend any time contemplating what you're doing when you're demoing.
Yeah.
Deconstruct suggests that you're dismantling in a thoughtful way and methodical way.
Right.
You're thinking about what to keep, what to re-examine, as well as what to throw away. 100% of that is up to you and what that looks like in the end. And I think people just feel like that there's some kind of final quiz to deconstructing. And we talked about that a little bit earlier. There's no final quiz. You're not done. You can just keep working on that and reevaluating that, and life and circumstances and new thoughts and new truths are going to come to you. So it's something that you're in the process of always doing. So there is no like, am I allowed to, when I'm deconstructing, am I allowed to think about this, or am I allowed to say that God is this? That's not a thing. You're not demoing your beliefs. You are pulling at that thread, one thread at a time. You're deconstructing. You can keep what you want. You can get rid of what you want, but just keep that almost as a consistent life philosophy of deconstructing and constructing.
Yeah.
And I think when we ask questions like, is it okay that I believe this? I think we have to evaluate that.
Yeah.
I really do. I mean, I because I've had those thoughts, and I've really had to go, why do I need permission? Because I've always needed permission, or I've always been told what to believe. And that needs to be part of my deconstruction.
Yes.
I need to evaluate that, and I need to realize that for me, I have my, like you talked about, Carl, I have my own intuition, and I can trust myself. I can whatever that is, whether I choose to continue to believe this or believe something else. I can trust that for my life. So
yeah, and when you start using words like reconstruction, people have come up with some illustrations that they think is appropriate, like art renovation, reconstruction, and then try to put a picture on it. But really, it's more like an evolution than the reconstruction. So yeah, when we have that tendency to go, well, is this right? Am I doing this right? You're doing it your way. You're doing it for you. And
yes, and that's just a part of what we were already indoctrinated into believing. We were indoctrinated in believing that there is a set of beliefs that is true, and we have to attain to that. And even when we're deconstructing, we still are struggling to let go of that.
Mm-hmm. I like even though you're it's been about 4 years. I admire the authority you speak with.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell that you understand and you know what you're going through. I admire that. So I just wanted to say that before we get off. But
Thank you.
also just really, really grateful for you being vulnerable and trusting us with your story, like I said in the beginning. And we are not going to give links
Mm-hmm.
to Bex just for right now. She doesn't want that, and we're going to respect that. But continue to listen to these stories, as we go. We're going to talk to next week. We'll be talking to ourselves, which we do a lot.
We'll be talking to each other. We're gonna hit play and start talking to ourselves.
I talk to myself a lot, but thing of getting older. But thank you so much for being with us on the show.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For the listeners out there, we want to thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you. We don't count you like how many followers we have. We try to avoid that, but we appreciate you for tuning in, for sharing the stories, and for helping us out of this community.
Yeah.
So we appreciate you. As always, we want to encourage you to be where you are, be who you are, and be at peace.
Thank you for joining us today on the Desert Sanctuary podcast.
Remember, all who wander in the desert are not lost.
We believe all of our stories are sacred.
We are always here if you need someone to hear your story.
Check out our blog on Pathos and also our YouTube channel.
And stay tuned for our Leaning Forward conference.
Remember, we love you.
And be at peace.